Vamos passar agora a palavra para Nadja Alexandre. Good night, Nadja. Nadja também, ela está em Singapura e, portanto, também fez um esforço muito grande, como Emília, para estar aqui conosco hoje. Nadja é diretora acadêmica da Academia Internacional de Resolução de Disputas em Singapura, é membro de grupos de trabalho de mediação internacional em Singapura, Hong Kong, Austrália, e é cofundadora do Conflict Coaching International. Pratica a mediação em situações de conflitos profissionais e comerciais e também intergovernamentais e transculturais. Então, vamos ouvi-la agora, uma apresentação onde ela explora essa transição de serviços de mediação ao vivo para serviços de mediação online. Por favor, Nadja, obrigado.
So in the middle of the COVID period, and by the COVID period, I'm referring to when there were travel restrictions just about everywhere. I think we're still actually in the COVID period, but we sort of forget it sometimes. But in the middle of the travel restriction COVID period, a colleague said to me, you should see my mediation practice, right? It looks like a NASA studio, quote unquote. I've got cables here, I've got, microphones I never sort of imagined before, I've got headphones, I've got everything. I'm in here at all times of the day and night, and my wife is wondering whether I'm having an affair, but actually I'm just doing online mediation. And I think for those of us who are practitioners during that period, we may well have had some experiences which surprised us, and they may have been positive or negative. Some mediators not having great experiences with online mediation, whatever form that took, and other mediators saying, well, I actually thought it would never work, but I was surprised at the fact that it did, whatever that meant. I also recall another story, and this is just sort of one illustration of a mediator talking about mediation over the Zoom platform. And he said he thought it was incredibly helpful, even though no one had talked about this. Parties were online and the lawyers were online and the mediator was online over Zoom. And while one party was making their opening statement, the other party was sending the mediator WhatsApp messages about what the first party was saying. And this mediator thought it was really useful. And it actually got me really thinking, and I'll ask you to think about, what sort of implications that has for the mediation process, what I might call the live mediation process or the face-to-face mediation process as we know it. Because I think once you start to shift mediation online, you have the capacity, more so than in relation to arbitration or litigation, which are, I guess, have more clear rules, are evidence-based, you have a third-party decision maker. Given its procedural flexibility and other characteristics and values of mediation, once you put it online, there really is the capacity to shift its fundamentals. And I think sometimes it's very easy to overlook that. And in this presentation, I want to put the microscope a little bit on this transition, and I'm referring to it as digital readiness. So what does it mean for mediators or for institutional service providers, institutions that offer mediation and that maybe also offer now online mediation, whether it's fully online or partially online, right? What does it mean to be digitally ready? And I think if we think about live mediation as being flexible, offering opportunities for creativity, having the capacity to be culturally fluent, for example. When we think about online mediation, I mean, just listen to Amelia's presentation, all the different types of technology you have, right? Text-based or verbal, video or not video, synchronous or not synchronous, and negotiation support systems and artificial intelligence and automated systems. I mean, once you go online, in terms of flexibility and variations on the process, it's 1,000-fold, right? It's so much more than the flexibility we know or the variations we know in face-to-face mediation. And I think we really need to think through, as mediators or service providers, what that means for what we're selling, what that means for the values and the fundamentals of what mediation is. So let me so just in this slide, if you think about you know, how technology has the ability, and I think about my WhatsApp example of the mediator on Zoom who was getting the WhatsApp messages, how technology has the ability to change the process, how we conduct the process of mediation, has the capacity to change how we view or think about the substantive problem in mediation, what I think about, how credible it is, how I'm breaking it down, and how technology has the ability, and here Amelia also referred to the fourth party, how people, or yeah, well, I'll say people for now, but maybe it's digital people later, how people interact, right, with one another. When I think about that example of mediating over Zoom, oh, and by the way, unbeknownst to anyone, I'm getting WhatsApp messages. I think that in many ways that challenges all three of these dimensions of mediation. It challenges how the process is happening. It challenges, and the transparency of that as well. It challenges how people are interacting. And I think it would have shifted how the mediator, I'm guessing this, I don't know, how the mediator was thinking about the substantive problem, right? Because he's getting a commentary in one ear or on one device while listening to somebody else. So what I want to present is a practical framework for digital readiness based on these three touchstones. And I'm calling them usability, reliability, and accessibility. All right. I've looked at the literature on mediation. I run a research center called the Singapore International Dispute Resolution Academy, SIDRA, which I understand, SIDRA. I understand that is alcoholic in Spanish. Is that right? I'm not sure. I think it means cider. Well, we are the non-alcoholic version anyway in Singapore. But we ran a survey on mediation, what was important to users, and I've categorized them in a particular way here, but it's come back to usability, reliability, and accessibility. And if you look at, I'm just looking at what it's called again, the International Council for Online Dispute Resolution. They have a set of standards for online mediation, and how I've sort of described, or how I will describe, usability, reliability, and accessibility are also consistent with that. So it's not pulled out of nowhere, but draws on a lot of knowledge and know-how and empirical data that's out there already. Oops. Yeah. All right. So if I think about usability, in face-to-face mediation, we're talking about here, you know, mediation maximizing the user experience, user autonomy, or what we might know as party autonomy. Our CIDRA surveys show that the most important thing for users in selecting a dispute resolution forum, particularly international one, whatever it was, whatever dispute resolution form, was impartiality. That was the most important thing for the user experience, to have an impartial forum, to have a confidential forum, to have an efficient forum, a transparent forum, and a procedurally flexible forum. And that's how I've defined usability for the purposes of mediation. And when you shift and if you take that and try to move it online, what does that mean? Well, I think it means, yes, it's user-friendly, your platform, it's intuitive, and it's customizable, if that's a word, right? To make it more flexible. it also still needs to be transparent, right? Which brings me back to my WhatsApp example from before. It also means, I think, that you need to be able to move backwards and forwards between different parts of the process, if that's what the parties want. It may mean that users get to co-design parts of the process. They may have the right to legal representation, or they may agree not to have legal representation, but they're not forced into a particular way of doing it. And that they can work through the mediation at their own pace, shifting, for example, between synchronous and asynchronous formats. That would be, I guess, usability in its most ideal format. What about reliability? All right, so sorry, I'm going to stop there and say some of these categories, the way I've done them, they do overlap, right? And for me, that's not a problem because we don't live in watertight containers in our lives. It's just a model, right? But you'll see that they do overlap to some extent because they will mean slightly different things in different contexts. Right, but in terms of reliability, we're talking again about procedural flexibility, but robust procedural flexibility that you can rely on, that's not going to fall flat, that is secure, that is confidential. You're also talking about regulatory robustness, which means that you've got a link between the online mediation service and the legal system, right? That, for example, to use a basic example, your e-signatures are recognized, right? The document that you upload or that you sort of somehow put together as a mediated settlement agreement would be recognized by the applicable law, but also that there is accountability, that there's accountability by the professionals and the people in the virtual mediation room, right? And the sort of relevant legal system. And of course, in a really basic sense, technical sense, we're talking about, a system that doesn't fall apart, where, and we're talking about responsiveness, right? If something doesn't work, that there's somebody to come in and help you make it work. And of course, in a face-to-face sense, it really centers very much around the regulatory robustness and accountability and confidentiality in a face-to-face sense, but you can see how it extends to include some different types of issues in the online forum. All right, and third, accessibility. So when we talk about accessibility and we're thinking about face-to-face mediation, it can mean different things for different people. It can mean geography, it can mean infrastructure, venue facilities, it can be cost accessibility. Can I afford this mediation venue, this mediator, these lawyers to represent me? It can also refer to language, for example. And once we shift to online, those things may still be relevant, some of them at least, but we also start to talk about digital literacy. And, I think we've got to remember that accessibility is also part of the broader narrative of access to justice. And what does that mean, right, when we move online? So in many ways, online mediation, I think, claims to offer a new kind of accessibility. That can mean virtual meeting spaces, geography becomes irrelevant. Can people access this on their smartphones if they don't have sort of a relevant, a PC or a computer? Can they access it regardless of their broadband width, depending on where they are geographically, if they're in remote regions? Can they access it regardless of physical disabilities? And accessibility also can mean something different, apart from the fact that, okay, during COVID, maybe I couldn't travel, and so we did it online, and that gave me accessibility without traveling. It also means that if I want to access a particular type of mediator, or I want to access a particular type of expert who I can't get to for whatever reason, I might be able to bring them in online, right? So regardless of COVID, right, in the brave new post-COVID world, accessibility might also mean bringing people to me. And I think anecdotally, at least, what we're seeing more of, certainly from a Singaporean perspective, is a lot more hybrid mediations now, which are partially online and partially off. I think my time is just about up. So I think I'll stop in 1 second if I can. What I did do, and I'll just show this to you, but I won't go into it in any detail. What I tried to, when this might be for the discussion, I tried to compare just on the basis of, what I could find online, how Zoom as an online mediation platform would sort of rate against eBram. eBram's a platform coming out of Hong Kong. It's a fairly new one, and it's an online dispute resolution provider listed under APEC's new ODR collaborative framework. And it's probably no surprise, it's a dedicated platform. Amelia also talked about these, and it's got, case-based and role-placed access control. It's got, panels of mediators. It's got case management. It's got blockchain technology. It's got all sorts of things that Zoom doesn't have. Yet Zoom is more popular, right? At least from where I sit in the world. And why? This is based on a UK survey, sort of qualitative survey. And I think it's no surprise that so far, most people who've used Zoom to mediate haven't had a bad experience. In fact, often they've had a good experience. Settlement rates, according to mediators, have remained stable. Most didn't have any issues with confidentiality. There were a few problems around third-party presences, Zoom bombing, some surreptitious recording, but people are familiar with Zoom. And so, the big question is, will we stay with Zoom or Google Meets or Teams or all those things, or will we embrace dedicated online resolution platforms for mediation? That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadja. Very, very interesting, all the things you are putting on the table. Vamos poder continuar essa discussão durante o debate.